employees. It's a collaborative process. We need to work our way through that. I need to be able to present information and present an action plan to employees with the understanding that there really are no other alternatives at this point. We can't afford a $500,000 increase in our health insurance if we do nothing. So we do need the cooperation of our unions and our employees in terms of moving forward in a way that preserves jobs and maintains services. And without that, we'll be facing some very difficult decisions associated with 2012. We have difficult enough decisions to begin with, but we do need some savings on health insurance to be able to preserve positions and jobs in town. That's reality.
Greg, could we maybe add a bullet? I'm not sure how to quite phrase it, but related to potentially forthcoming legislation on health insurance.
Absolutely.
And meld that into the overall plan.
Gives me a good opportunity to walk away after I press the button and see nothing happening. It was working great at about 4 o'clock today.
Let's try it. Goes back to one of your other earlier goals there about IT.
Maybe just replace the old laptop.
According to Gene, they say that there's some minor changes that can be made to these things that make them work pretty well, so hopefully that happens.
So this is all deliberate to be able to get us to look at technology. This is something we really have to do.
Well, why don't you go on with the pink slip and
I'm
maybe
gonna
we'll catch up.
go on with the pink slip, and it's gonna catch up.
It did.
Just did.
Similar to the employee benefits, something that I've identified as a goal and needs to be done is regionalization and discussion of shared services. I've had some discussions with some of the neighboring communities about sharing of services. There are some opportunities as it relates to health and inspectional services. There's also an opportunity that exists relative to public safety dispatch. There's a group that works through the Middlesex County Sheriff's Office, which includes Reading, Wakefield, and Melrose. I've had some discussions already with the administrators in those communities. It is something that we do need to seriously look at. Independent of any discussions that we have with our unions, it is something that we, in terms of efficiency, it makes sense. It doesn't make sense that we have uniformed personnel at the desk 24/7, 365. Those uniformed personnel, their resources are best spent in the community, either as police officers or firefighters. And I realize that this is very different than the tradition that we have in town, but times have changed, and I think that those personnel are probably best deployed in the community. So we need to work, or I need to work with these communities in terms of identifying areas where we can have regionalized or shared services. Completion of the water purchase agreement. We have a contract with the town of Andover. Cost the town upwards of $1 million a year. I've made a presentation to the community about renewal of that agreement on terms that are favorable to North Reading. Have not heard back yet, but similar to the board's overall strategic vision, we really need to identify, and I need to identify and work with you in terms of long-term strategy involving water, more short-term water, and more long-term wastewater. Consider privatization of some municipal services as an opportunity for cost savings. One of the areas that I've identified is discussion about privatization of the ambulance service. And I think I've identified in my goal statement to provide the board with a request for proposals and get that process moving within the next month. So that's one of my key priorities in terms of immediate goal, is to get that process moving as quickly as possible.
Excuse me, Greg, I missed, what was your goal for which item?
Privatization of the ambulance service.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not saying that that's a slam dunk. What I'm saying to you is it makes some sense to be able to go out and look and see what the cost might be to the town and what savings might be able to be realized as a result of doing that, and give you an opportunity to make an informed decision based upon that information. Finally, discussion with the superintendent concerning shared services with the schools involving information technology, facility maintenance, and financial services. Those are all big things, and if you look at that last bullet, it probably can be one goal all by itself, because I know that the schools are also looking at ways where they can possibly save some costs and share some services. But at least identification of a couple of things: technology, maintenance, and financial or business services. Those are things that we have that overlap between the town and the schools. We don't educate kids on this side of town government, but what we do is we do the items that are up there, and there's an opportunity to do some opportunity for savings. Specifically in the area of technology, I think the town and the schools will both identify that there's a need for having someone who can really be out there in terms of assisting us with some of the ideas and projects that we have, and seeing those things work their way through the pipeline. And I think that the superintendent identified that, I've identified that, and it's likely that going forward, we'll look to have some type of sharing of services in that area. Personnel rules and regulations. I've identified as one of the risk areas that we want to do is we want to update our personnel policies and procedures. I want to create a supervisor's guide with uniform rules and procedures. It's a very detailed plan, not something that simply is general guidelines, very specific in terms of how we handle certain situations that do arise. And then ensure that when I meet with department heads to ensure that the regulations are being implemented uniformly and consistently across the board. I think it's really important because everyone has a different understanding of how they deal with issues. I think it's important to document how those issues are handled and what the expectation is. Collective bargaining and labor. We have 7 municipal contracts that are outstanding that aren't settled right now. Efforts are being made every week to try to settle those contracts. Doing the best we possibly can under the situation. And it takes cooperation on both sides. Contracts don't get settled because I decide they get settled. They get settled because groups meet somewhere in the middle, or there's an understanding of the situation and we move forward. So it's certainly a priority. It's a priority to me that we get those things settled, and hopefully it's a priority to our union employees that it's important to them. And there's a realization that the town doesn't have unlimited funding to be able to fund contracts. The money needs to come from somewhere. We don't have it. Continue to fairly resolve grievances and labor disputes, defend management positions in pending arbitration cases. It's one of those things that's below the waterline. There's all types of things that are going on in terms of grievances and labor disputes. Most of them are resolved informally. Sometimes they go to arbitration. And when they go to arbitration, we need to defend the town's position. One of the things that I'd like to accomplish that's new is conducting detailed wage and benefit surveys to support the board's bargaining strategy. I think that's an area that I certainly can improve upon, and I think that going forward, I need to have sufficient detail in terms of how we compare to our peer communities. I think that is really what drives decisions in the bargaining process. It's not so much me coming in and saying, you know, I think we can do this, or I think I can do that. Those decisions really, in my judgment, should be based upon how we compare. Are we high, are we low, are we right in the middle? And I think that that's important going forward. And then lastly, reviewing in terms of how we negotiate our contracts. What's the organizational structure that we have to review? Contracts, right now, the charter provides that the town administrator is the collective bargaining agent for the town, and town council is often used to negotiate those contracts. I'd like to look at some other areas going forward, and I won't be specific today in terms of maybe we could change that. And then the final goal that I have, and it's really of no surprise, is the FY 2012 budget, and it ties into everything that I've talked about earlier. Right now, we're looking at a budget that's about $750,000 out of balance on the municipal side. potentially more, potentially less, but nevertheless, it's not a balanced budget as we're looking at this point. My job is to deliver to you a balanced budget, so consider reduction of services and assess impacts on non-mission critical services. I think Selectman O'Leary touched upon that this evening, that everything is critical. But one of the things I did say when I started off working here almost 6 years ago is public safety is important. So we need to look at public safety as really being a critical aspect going forward. Toward that end, reviewing funding justification for our overtime accounts, specifically in public safety. Because public safety is a priority, doesn't necessarily mean that we can continue to fund without making some critical decisions and looking very thoroughly at our overtime expenditures and our overtime history. And then lastly, developing a funding strategy for what I call long-term risks, including retiree, health insurance, and pension costs. Remember, we established accepted a statute at town meeting for OPEB liabilities. And OPEB liabilities are other post-employment benefits, which is a term that actuaries like to use when they look at what the total liability is to the town for all of its employees when they retire. And it's a huge and it's a staggering number. One of the things that I need to look at is we need to develop a strategy to fund that. It's not to say we can fund millions of dollars, but to be able to set aside some money every single year. The reason for that is the bill will come due and payable at some future date. But also the more immediate goal that we have is when we go through the bond rating business, we need to make sure that we have a strategy in place where the town risks that its bond rating will be lowered. So that's a summary of the goals. And it's pretty ambitious, and hopefully it follows similar to what the board had asked me to do as part of your presentation. And I wanted to present it this evening and get any suggestions and comments that you may have. Comments? Anybody?
Greg, I would, since someone else
Go ahead.
is-
Go ahead, you go first.
I would like to see some dates put on. Some of these are ongoing, some of them are very specific. And I'd like to put some target calendar dates on some of them.
Yeah.
Those that, are in the, with the intent of getting them completed over the next year. The ongoing ones, obviously, maybe identify a couple key milestones.
I can tell you the dates that I've got on things right now is for the digital filing, July. The task tracking, March. The assessment center for police, September. Employee benefits is something that's ongoing. Regionalization of services is ongoing. I'll get back to you in terms of a particular calendar date with that. I'll give you a date on the update on the personnel policies. I think we're pretty well along in that process. I'd like to have it reviewed by council. Collective bargaining issues are ongoing. And then the budget, I owe you a budget recommendation in March. So certainly that's the date, but what I'll do is I'll go through and document that and give it back to the board.
Great.
So is this something you present to the board every year?
I haven't done it like this, Michael, before. It's been more of an informal process. But because the board was involved, very active in its discussions about the strategic plan, I wanted to be able to do this to tie in with what the board's presentation was.
Because, I mean, I think this is wonderful, but I look at them more as project goals, not town administrator goals. So, and maybe that's just a philosophy perspective here, but.
Sure.
I mean, you read through them, I mean, the reason this came up, did this come up from our discussions that we've had over the last few weeks in regards to, what brought this on for the agenda? I guess that's the question to ask.
I asked Greg to make public goals that